Welcome to WRM Work Relationships Matter. I'm your host, the Edward Jones, a certified life coach who specializes in work relationships. My guest today is Paul Edwards, Director of the Student Athletic Resource Center and Associate Director of Student Success. Welcome, Paul.
Hi, Edward. How are you? Nice to see you again.
I'm doing fine, and I'm glad you were able to join me today. We're going to talk about you and your role as a leader, because as a work relationship coach, I always like to talk with people who have been successful, people who are getting it right. And when I stopped by your office a couple of years ago, the atmosphere was just great. I really felt camaraderie. I felt collaboration, all those things that were working really well. So I wanted to get you on my show now to get a little more insight into how you created that atmosphere. But before we get there, I'd like to start at the beginning, a little bit of background about you, how it all began before you got on your journey as a successful leader.
Awesome. Well, again, I'm very humbled that you asked me, and I know our time at Sac State that we shared, we worked together, not very often, but we always connected, and so it's great that we've connected since you left the university. So again, I'm very humbled for you to have me here. Wow. So I'm not sure how exciting of a story about how it all began. I'm a native Northern Californian. I'm a second generation college student. Both my parents were first gens. They grew up locally in Northern California in Sacramento. Both attended Sacramento State. My dad was the first and only in his family to graduate from college. My mom was the same, but my mom graduated actually when I was 12 or 13. She raised two kids and was that typical 60s, 70s, I guess, stay-at-home mom that raised a couple of kids, and then she finished the second half of her degree at Sac State. So I guess I was predestined to become a Hornet at Sac State, and so. I don't know. I think most 18 to 22, 23-year-olds, as we're going through college or we're going through our life, not all of us go to college, kind of have these eyes of things we want to do, plans on what we want to do, and things work out the way they work out. I was really fortunate to get an opportunity early on. I should say, I guess it's pertinent to say, my father struggled with cancer for a long time. He got cancer when I was very young, and he moved up the ranks in higher education at Sacramento State, and but he died at an early age. I was 19, he was 42 when he passed away. But he and my mother both, as first gen, saw the value of higher ed very early. They wanted to make more for themselves, I guess, and put themselves in a better situation financially, I guess. And probably just living life in a different way than what both of them had grown up. And when that happened, it worked its way towards affecting my sister and I both. And both my parents just landed, I think, a little bit by luck as first gens in higher education. My mom was a librarian. My dad worked in student affairs, and he was a registrar and all that. So it kind of happened organically for me and my sister to kind of lend in education. My sister's a kindergarten teacher in K-12 and has been for 20 plus years. So I don't know if it just was through osmosis or whatever, the value of education and the importance that it played in our home, I think, is what led me to where I'm at now and what I've been doing.
Did your parents recruit you to Sac State? I know I tried to do it with my kids when I was at another university. I recruit them. This is a good school. You can come here.
Yeah.
Did your parents do that?
It was funny. I don't think my dad ever thought, because I was talking about doing real estate. Part of me wanted to be a basketball. I was coaching basketball. I was one of those guys that wasn't quite quick enough. Didn't quite have, I had a good jump shot, but I wasn't quite quick enough. And being 6'3", didn't weigh enough, whatever. I would have loved to have played basketball at the next level. I was ready to play at the community college, and I got hurt. That led me into coaching. I thought for sure I was going to be a high school, college coach of some sort. found out how demanding and difficult and travel that was. And my dad's illness led me to kind of stay at home for a minute or two. And that allowed me for my dad to come and say, hey, do what you want, but there's a couple of people at Sac State that know you. They would love to have you come on campus and maybe, if you're interested, work for them as a student assistant. So my dad did help me at the beginning, but then after that, he was kind of hands off. And then, like I said, he passed away when I was in college. So my path was kind of set, and I have him. He's one of my heroes, and I have him to thank. But most of it was after he was gone, and then it just started to organically happen where I really liked this. I connected with some folks in athletics. I connected with some folks in academic affairs and student affairs, and the rest was history. And all of a sudden I blink an eye and I'm almost now 50, almost 52, I'll be 52 next month. And I've been at Sac State full time, not counting my time as a student, for 29 years. So crazy.
Well,
crazy.
That's great, because I tried to get my son into student affairs, and one of them became an RA, but that was the end of it. So I give kudos to your dad for keeping you in the field.
Yeah.
Now,
No,
you have been involved in athletics, and is that where your leadership ability began?
Gosh, that's a great question. I don't know, to be honest with you. I mean, I grew up in a household, my dad played basketball at Sac State when they had a JV team, and then he did that for a year, and then, it was like, okay, he's got to get a job. And so he didn't get to pursue that to the length that I think he wanted to. But I grew up with a dad who was very athletic. Sports were a big part of, we watched sports, we followed sports. I played high school basketball and was planning to play at the community college after that. And then I got into coaching, and coaching's hard. It's hard. I have great respect for the coaches that I work with in the athletic department. And I should say, as you know, I don't work in athletics. I work in student affairs. And although I have an athletic title, I get the luxury of working with the associate ADs, or the athletic directors, the coaches. I have a great deal of respect for coaches and what it takes to be a successful coach. I definitely picked up some stuff from that. But I think I picked up as much from being a youngster sitting around a dinner table, listening to mom and dad talk about higher education and the struggles and the successes and all that. I think that's what kind of led me there. But athletics definitely played a part in it. There's certainly a value in leadership. And I see it now, in my sons, who both have played college basketball. I see some of their leadership skills coming out, and there's no doubt that athletics played a part in that for sure. It can't, there's no way possible that you can be an athlete. I know you're a former athlete. I mean, it just instills some things in you that you carry into no matter what field you get into.
So what kind of things were those? Because I agree with you that athletics does help, but in your opinion, what were the leadership lessons you learned from athletics?
I think you have to be willing to be okay with failure. I mean, I can give you all the cliches in the world. Batters in baseball, if they bat 300, that's a success. That means they're making outs 7 out of 10 times at the plate. Jump shooters in college, if you shoot over 40%, you're a good shooter. That means you miss 6 out of 10 shots. Rarely do you see teams that go undefeated. I think the humility that comes along with sports, that you're not going to, at the end of the season, there's only going to be one winner, in many cases, a championship. I think that plays into it. So I think the humility that you gain from it, the accepting failure, the learning experience you get. And then when you win, it's also teaching you some humility, because we see in today with social media and other things, there are people who have great signs and show great humility even with their success. And so I think that helped me to be a little grounded. It helped me to stay real with things and realize in the moment today, I've got today, 24 hours. Don't worry too much about what happened yesterday, and you can't worry about tomorrow. So try to stay in today where you can be the most successful. And I think sports help us keep us grounded in many of those ways, especially if we pick up on sports and athletics cues along the way. So I would say those are some of the key things that help me.
Right. As a leader, what is, whether it's in sports or in your current job or wherever, what is the toughest situation you faced as a leader, and how did you handle it?
Um, I don't know that I can pinpoint a very, very specific situation. I will tell you that working in college athletics, and as I said earlier, even though I don't directly report to our athletic director or
Mhm.
whatever, and I really haven't reported to the AD. I've always been student affairs or academic affairs when it's come to my higher ed career. But one of the things, the bigger overlying thing in college athletics, that challenges is when you're at, there's the Power Five institutions right now. There's a lot of
Mhm.
money generated from TV contracts. There's a lot. So people on the outside that don't work on the inside of college athletics think there's just all this money and there's all this
Mhm.
success.
Right.
And it happens to so few schools. You have so many schools at the division, lower level, mid-level of Division One, Division Two, Division Three, NAIA
Mhm.
programs, community college programs. They're working on budgets that are shoestring,
Right.
and they're
Right.
finding ways to still get it done and create a positive experience. I mean, my career has been
Mhm.
more, being at a place like Sacramento State has been more humbling because the budgets haven't been there. And so there's no doubt the
Right.
challenge of budgets and resources and people. And so what you learn is you've got to find really quality people dedicated to wanting to help improve experiences for the student athletes or students. And so I
Mhm.
think that may be what drew me to academic and student affairs work. I got to still taste the athletics. My whole career has been still working with intercollegiate athletes, but I've gotten to focus on the side of trying to keep them grounded with the goal of, getting that college degree. Even my best athletes that I've had over the year, and I've probably worked with close to
Mhm.
4,500 athletes now, even the ones that I
Right.
knew were going to go on to professional careers in baseball, it was still talking to them about getting college degrees and having that, having another option, having another path that you could go down to. But doing that, back to your question directly, was the challenge of resources has been really hard. And now
Okay.
I'll be honest with you, I
Mhm.
probably, if we had this interview 2 years from now, I'd
Mhm.
probably be coming back to you saying the state of college athletics has been the most
Mhm.
challenging because it's starting. Yeah, we're coming hopefully out of a pandemic right now,
Right.
and that's
Yeah.
been challenging. But college
Mhm.
athletics has been making a move towards, the pay for play thing.
Right.
You've got the infamous transfer portal that's starting now with college athletes. That's going to add some challenges to people who work in my field when it comes to leading folks, because there's so much volatility and uncertainty. And so
Mhm.
I don't have one specific case to give you.
Mhm.
There's always special cases with students, cases that break your heart.
Right.
The kid that you work with whose parents, I had a student that had both parents die her
Oh
freshman year.
man.
I mean, just,
Wow.
there's those individual cases where there's
Mhm.
family struggles and other things that just break your heart. But
Right.
overall, I think it's just the challenge to do a lot with little. And the ever changing state of college athletics has been the challenge I've had in trying to balance and do what we do in the Student Athlete Resource Center.
Now, the thing I look at, I kind of garbled your titles for a minute there, but you got two roles: Student Athletic Resource Center and Student Success.
Yeah.
Break those down for me. What's maybe the Reader's Digest version of both of those roles?
Yeah. So they're really essentially the same role. It's just at one
Mhm.
point, I don't know, probably a decade ago, people were like, wait, you're the director of the Student Athlete Resource Center. Yeah, that's the office. We're kind of a one stop in student affairs at Sacramento State. We do everything from,
Mhm.
when coaches start recruiting students all the way to graduation. So my office is involved in admissions, athletic compliance, advising,
Mhm.
orientation, scheduling, grad checkouts, helping them get connected to resources on campus, whether it be mentoring, tutoring, career center, major advising, all the way through graduation. Well,
Okay.
the director of Student Athlete Resource Center is something that on the student affairs, academic affairs side, people that
Mhm.
I interact with on that side, they understand that. They understand what that title is a little bit. They understand my role.
Mhm.
When I flip over and put the hat on, and it's really the same hat, but when I'm over in athletics and I'm at an NCAA conference or something
Mhm.
else, and I say my title is Associate Athletic Director for Student Success, the
Right.
folks that are in the athletic world, oh, okay, so you're in charge of admissions, academics, other things. So it's really just been a a formality of, depending on the audience that I'm in or where I'm at,
Okay.
it's able for them to kind of decipher better my role. Because when I first started in this role, when Sac State went Division I back in the early 90s, and sort of the SARC, the Student Athlete Resource Center, we built it, and we didn't really start building it much until 2006. But during the travel from 1992 to now, there was some needs to have, both sides of student affairs, academic affairs, and then athletics kind of understand all that. So it became necessary as our program continued to build. And then our current vice president that I work under, Dr. Ed Mills, kind of has a specialty of wanting to create one-stops where the student can come for the mass majority of their needs. And so he very early in his tenure at Sac State pulled me aside and said, hey, let's try to create something with the Student Athlete Resource Center maybe, and create sort of a one-stop. So
Great.
yeah.
Well, let's get one thing I think about, and again, as a work relationship coach, I'm always interested in work relationships. When I started out, I was into budgets, planning, et cetera, but I discovered that relationships are really what make things work. When I went into your office, and I'm going to go back to this again, that I felt it was the energy, it was a positive energy that was there. How did you create that?
Man, I would love to give myself all the credit in the world. It just happened, Edward. It happened organically. I mean, I've been really fortunate. I've had some people in my career at Sacramento State that have believed in what I could do. They knew I was a relationship person. It didn't hurt that I was the son of two higher ed parents that had worked in the field and knew it. There was some things that I don't know. I'd like to think that the people that I interacted with that were above me, that were making decisions on what direction to put the SARC and other things in place, they trusted what I could do. And it's ironic. I mean, and I know part of the reason you asked me to come on today related to relationships in work. I mean, that's been my bread and butter, to be very cliche. That has my relationships that I've built on the university. And the other thing is I've been super fortunate. I mean, how many people can say they've worked at one institution? I've been really, really lucky for that. And so because of that, my relationships, I've strengthened them. And even when people come and go or people retire and I'm still around, I've got a lot of experience in building those relationships, because I think when you work at an institution where resources are tight, including people and money and other things, I think relationships are your go-to. And what I found is that when I'm in situations with either colleagues on my own campus or at other places, when it's easier for me to see where there's been a lack of investment in a relationship. And it's hard because relationship investment takes a lot of time. I've got this list of to-do things today. And if I go over here and spend time with Edward Jones, the AVP for student life, and I spend 2 hours with him at a lunch, whatever, what investment am I getting out of that? Well, I may not see that investment immediately, but it's the long-term relationship, respect. Just the relationship is the key. So I think that has something to do with the energy you felt in SARC. I also will tell you, it's a little bit lucky. I've been really, really fortunate to hire people who are hard workers. They're not trying to chase the dollar bill in terms of their career. They're interested in athletics. Most of the people I have played sports or were involved in sports or have a similar story to mine, that they're passionate about sports, but they also love helping students maneuver through this process. Because as you can imagine, and you saw it, the more I go into it, the more complicated it seems to get these days in terms of the path that students have to go through. And every student's so different and they all come from different backgrounds. So I've been really fortunate to get people in my office. And I haven't turned over a whole lot of employees, but the ones I've had have made decisions to go on for family reasons, or they went back to a school that they graduated from or something. So I feel really, really good that, that I've created that environment, but I think it has a lot to do with the people that are in there. My staff right now, I have an amazing group of full-time advisors, and I have about a dozen part-time mentors, and they're just their goal every day is to help students. They want to come in, work hard, and it's just happened organically. If that happened because I helped create a welcoming, relationship-driven atmosphere or environment, awesome. I mean, people have asked me like, well, Paul, what's your leadership style? And as an undergraduate business major, I probably should be able to say, oh, Edward, it's democratic or servant or pace setter, or depending on what book you pick up, there's all these different ones. I can't pick one, and I've never been that theory guy. I just know that I want work to be. Work's not always fun, but I want work to be fun. I want us to enjoy what we're doing, even when it's hard. I want us to work together. My staff teaches me as much every day, I think, compared to what I teach them. I mean, I learn so much from my staff every day and their work styles. And I think when you have that, and I like to feel like I'm a boss who has my employees' backs, who I've learned some lessons in my career, like, don't helicopter them so much, let them, and let them go out and create their own relationships. Because when I'm not here at some point, I want them to go on and be able to maneuver in their careers and have learned how to create those relationships. Because again, I know it's really ironic and very cliche for you having me on here with your title, but that has been the number one reason behind any success that someone might label me with in my career at Sac State, is that it's been about, I've been willing to invest in relationships, and I'll forego and I'll miss a deadline or two. I'll go to my boss and say, sorry, I missed this. If I had to give up time to build a relationship, whether it be with a associate dean, a dean, a department chair, another colleague in my division, somebody at another school. I think we get so siloed so easily right now that if you don't constantly try to motivate yourself to build relationships, I think it's real easy to sink back in our silos. And we still do it, even with those relationships. But I think that's been the key for me.
Right. Well, the thing I think about, Paul, you've obviously been successful. The words that come to mind in listening to you is, number one, you are a boundary spanner. You go beyond the boundaries of your place to create relationships. You're a good listener. You have integrity, and you have a welcoming personality. So I look at those things as in my estimation, as to why you have the atmosphere that you have. Because when you reach beyond your boundaries, you can let your staff know how things really are and not let the silos allow people to project things that may not be there. And it's not that you listen very well. You hear what's going on, and then you're able to respond in a way that has empathy. So those are the things that the adjectives I would use to describe what I see and what you just told me. Would you think that would be accurate?
I think so, and thank you for saying them. It's the boundary part is sort of interesting and fun for me to hear from you, just because I know I've definitely been had a cautionary approach to how I've run and built the Student Athlete Resource Center over the years, because I have to balance, you balance that relationship with a head coach whose job is to win basketball or baseball or football, or whatever it be, track events. And then you got to balance that with faculty and deans and stuff. And so I've sort of played this middle role of having to, like, hey, coach, I understand what you're trying to do, but you also got to understand over here, there's an academic integrity piece, or there's an academic, respect level that we have to maintain. And whether that's deciding on an admissions for an athlete who might be on the borderline of admissible or whatever, or it might be how you're handling a situation with a faculty member and a student and miss class time or something. So I've always been cautionary because of those relationships. I definitely don't want to sour one side or the other. So it definitely is challenging, but it was interesting to hear you describe it as going outside those boundaries, because I don't think I thought of myself in that manner, but I guess it does make sense. I definitely have to play both sides of some of those relationships that I'm the middle person on.
Right, and the balancing between those two competing priorities, whether it's athletics or academics, I know how it is that we had the situation in our household where my wife was really wanting my kids to do well academically, and I used to coach soccer. And my son was one of the star players on my team. We were going to have a very tough game. And she said, since his grades didn't come up, he wasn't going to play. And I'm thinking, come on, honey, he's got to play. You can start the punishment after the game.
Yeah.
She said, no, he is going to sit out. He knew the rules. He's got to get his books first. And I see that on a larger scale with what you're dealing with.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's very much a common theme in college athletics, and people have to make those decisions. And at some schools, they may not make the same decisions we make. I don't take that kind of power. I may make some suggestions to my athletic director, associate AD, or even the coaches, because I like them. But, there's competing results. Coaches are hired, even at the college level, they're hired and paid to win games.
Absolutely.
That tends to automatically conflict with the academic expectations. So that definitely has been part of the challenges that I've had. Back to one of your earlier questions. I mean, that's trying to manage and balance that those competing issues. And then to top it off, I always like to throw myself under the bus a little bit and say, hey, you know what? I'm like the regular people pleaser personality that a lot of us are. I don't want to work in an environment where I've got folks upset with me or not trusting me or thinking I don't have their best interest. So that's where it comes back, that full circle, that relationship. I have a baseball coach at Sac State that's very, very successful, and we talk regularly. And sometimes we walk away from conversations, agreeing to disagree. But Reggie respects my role, and he knows that I understand his role and respect it. And that there's sometimes we're just not going to quite get to where we meet right at the same spot. I might have to stop here. He might have to stop here. And we leave this middle section to kind of work itself out. And hey, guess what? Sometimes the student has to maneuver within that. And that's where both his role and my role as mentors and as leaders on our campus help that student. But sometimes we just have to kind of go, hey, I respect you, coach. Hey, Paul, I got you as well. And it has to happen naturally. And sometimes there's success from my perspective and Reggie didn't like the result, or vice versa. So it's not always perfect. But if I'm going to sacrifice anything, it's probably going to be anything on the list, but trying to sacrifice relationships. I don't want, the people that I respect, and as I've gotten older, you would think your relationships expand. My relationships have actually it's kind of like going to the gym, lifting weights. The relationships that I have are still very similar to what they were when I really got this ball rolling in SARC. I've just strengthened them more. Now, when somebody leaves, retires or whatever, now you've got to start that up and do it again. But I've definitely become good at picking the right people on campus that I need to build those relationships and make sure they know who I am, the true person that I am, so that they can trust me and not think that I'm just trying to get from point A to point B by any means possible. I want to respect all sides of it. So. Right.
Now, Paul, this interview has gone so fast. So I'm down to my last question, and that is, is there any question that I didn't ask you that you'd want to say, I really want people to know this, so when they tune in, they'll get a little bit more from me? What would that question be, and how would you answer it?
Gosh, stay in the day, stay in today. For young people that might listen to this, college students or fresh out of college, stay in today. I know it sounds, I don't know, kind of corny, but it's stay in today. You really only have what you can manage today. So the problem that you foresee coming down the road, what can you do today to impact it in any way, shape, or form? That's one of the things I've really tried to do, and I've gotten better and better at it in my life, doing that. The other thing is, and again, I've said cliche about 10 times already in this interview, but the title of this podcast that you're doing, the reason that you reached out to me about this relationship and leadership is, I think sometimes we miss I think we forget that leadership, and granted, big companies that sell products and have to make dollars for their shareholders, they may be stuck into some situations, but even those folks running those companies making a lot of money are likely going to point towards leadership. So I know it's we've been talking about it all interview, but I mean, for me, have the patience to build relationships, because they will help you become better leaders, because you cannot shoulder all that is going to be on your plate when you have a leadership role, no matter what you do, private, public sector, higher education, athletics, selling widgets, whatever you're doing for a living. If you get into a leadership role and you're not willing to invest the time in relationships, you're probably setting yourself up for failure, or you're at least setting yourself up for a situation that is not going to be as successful as it would be if you've broken down those silos and you've invested that time and energy into the person and the people who drive that. Because I know we're getting more and more IT, more techie. We're still in a lot of industries that are people driven, and we're human beings. We get mad easy. We get, I tell my staff all the time on this issue, do you want to be happy or right today? Is it that important that you have to be right, or will happy maintain that relationship and build that for another conversation at a later day? So I again, that would be my advice. That would be what has molded me, what's helped me be successful in my 30-year career at Sacramento State. So build those relationships.
Now, if a student athlete is thinking about coming to Sac State, how would they get a hold of you and your department? What would be the web link or phone number or something? They said, I want to go to Sac State. I've heard this interview and I really want to work with this Paul Edwards. How would they contact you?
Yeah, of course you're asking me that during work from home pandemic time, right? So if you're watching
what's your home address?
Right? Yeah, right. What's my home address? No, I would tell you first and foremost, if you're thinking about playing college athletics at Sacramento State, go to our hornetsports.com and reach out to the coach of interest and find out about tryouts and recruitment. If you need to talk to me specifically about a basic question or two, the best thing would be to email me. My email address is my last name and my first initial. So that's Edwards P. So EDWARDSP at csus.edu. And my direct line at Sac State, never afraid to give that away, is 916-278-7796. And would be more than happy to chat with anybody. So.
Because the thing I'm thinking about as a parent, I'd want to go to a school where I knew my student would take care from the beginning to the end and that they would graduate. Because sports careers are so short, but life is long. So having someone who'd be there like you and your department would be just a godsend for me as a parent.
Yeah. Yeah.
So thank you, Paul, for being with me today. We've been with Paul Edwards, the Associate Director of Athletics, Student Success, and the Director of the Student Athletic Resource Center. Thank you much for being with us. This is the Edward Jones, Work Relationships Matter. Thank you for listening, and check us out on future podcasts. Have a great day. Bye. Okay, that's a wrap. We're good.
Excellent.
Let me get this thing back up here so I can come on back up here. There we go. Hold it. They're not kissing us up anyway. Okay, we're done. Okay. Welcome to WRM, Work Relationships Matter. I'm your host, the Edward Jones, a certified life coach who specializes in work relationships. Dr. Eric Gravenberg, educator, entrepreneur, and former university administrator, is my guest. He has launched numerous successful ventures. He is currently co-founder, president, and CEO of the Hawk Institute. Welcome, Eric.
Ed, thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
And I am so excited. And I kid you all the time talking about Eric with the Midas touch, but you have launched many successful ventures. We'll get into those later. But the first thing I want to do is talk about that background story you sent me, how your grandfather and father helped you become the man you are today. So would you like to share a little bit more about that?
Absolutely, and thank you, Ed. Well, I didn't get a chance to visit with my grandfather often because he was in Louisiana and or Texas, when I was growing up and I was a young kid. But some of the more vivid memories I have of him was just the one-on-one time we had back in his farm, and I wasn't much of a farmer, but I just really kind of liked that peacefulness that we had in our time together. And so he would spend time with me and he would talk about, the things that were important in life. And a lot of times I didn't understand them, but I remembered them and they brought back those kinds of lessons for me that I used later on that gave me strength. Real quickly, he was a sharecropper. And that
Okay.
sharecropper was basically, you were still an indentured servant because you were working somebody else's land for less than whatever was minimum wage. But he decided early on that he needed to break free from that and provide his sons and daughters an opportunity to get educated and to lead that life of servitude. So those lessons he shared with me, and then my father kind of reinforced those lessons, made a lot of sense. So even though I didn't spend a lot of time with him, he planted that seed and my father nurtured that seed for me to kind of, use those life lessons for life, leadership, and relationships. And they've really stuck with me in terms of my whole professional career. And from that, Ed, I think I really gained an appreciation for how important it is to be connected to our roots, because our roots give us power. Our roots in understanding our history and culture give us the strength that sometimes to endure in these kind of environments, the work environment, especially the area that you specialize in terms of handling those relationships. So I give a lot of credit, to both of them who didn't even go to school. I mean, my grandfather probably only went as high as third grade. He knew how to read, but he was probably the smartest man I knew. My father.
Now, one thing, now tell me, Eric, the lessons that you learned, because I can imagine as a sharecropper,
Yeah,
you get so many things, housing, seed, etc.
yeah,
And by the end of the year, you actually owe more than you earned.
that's
So
right.
how getting out of that sounds extremely difficult. What lessons could you take from that? Because it sounds like a never-ending cycle. You're always in debt. You're always, in a way, enslaved. So
Yeah,
what lessons did it take? That had to take a lot of effort to
yeah.
be able to break that. How did he do that?
Well, the first lesson he taught me, he said, everything is based on rhythm and time. And I didn't know
Okay.
that that's an old African proverb. And essentially, just having the patience, having a plan. And sometimes
Okay.
you can't execute the plan until it's the right moment. So part of his
Okay.
plan was he knew he needed to leave that servitude, but
Mm-hmm.
he had to do it at a time when it was the most opportune. He was tied to the land. He was tied in terms of the obligations that he had financially to the landholder. But he
Mm-hmm.
found a moment of someone who actually loaned all of that land in his area, a white plantation owner. He
Mm-hmm.
found the right opportunity, and that opportunity was that plantation owner, wife had died a long time ago. He was there with his son, loved his son. His son
Mm-hmm.
became very, very sick. My
Mm-hmm.
grandfather heard about that, went to go pay him a visit. First, the man didn't want to let him onto the property and said, "What are you
Mm-hmm.
doing here?" He said, "Look, I want to help. I want to help your son." Long
Okay.
story short, he ended up helping his son recover. And that man was so indebted to my grandfather that he provided him some resources so that late in the night, my grandfather could
Mm-hmm.
steal away, take the family, and leave the plantation and never look back. So everything is
Okay.
based on rhythm and time. That was a key lesson. And when I apply that to my life, there's a lot of times I have plans to do things.
Mm-hmm.
Either the situation's not right, I haven't cultivated the right kinds of network, or I haven't really
Mm-hmm.
worked the plan, and I need to be patient in order to execute the plan. So that's the first lesson he taught me.
Mm-hmm.
Because of that, he
That
was able to get away, and he did it on his terms.
okay.
He didn't have to look over his shoulder.
Yes. That's interesting. It's almost like doing the opposite of what you would think because he gave in order to get away.
Yes.
And many times you want to fight, you want to go head to head, and he gave and because of his giving, he softened that person's heart.
Right. Exactly. That's exactly it. And what was very interesting is that sometimes we think our enemies have to look a certain way or behave a certain way. And even the hardened enemy, if approached correctly and at the right time, can really dissipate those boundaries and those feelings of hatred that you might have. So I've learned
Right.
that a lot in my life. Sometimes the folks who I think might be those who might be against me, that may be something that I've conjured up in my mind. I need to test that. I need to find
Okay.
where I can be an ally with them to provide them with something so that I can receive in return. It's not always a quid
Great.
pro quo, but in some cases, just trying to make sure that you find the right allies.
Great. Great. Now, your grandfather got you out of bondage. It's almost like coming out of Egypt in that way. Your father was in that middle leg of the relay. So, what lessons did your father teach you?
Well, that's a good point. So let's put this in perspective. He got away, took his my sons and daughters, took them out of that environment, further into Louisiana. My father migrated to California after grandfather died.
Okay.
And that was, and I forget how old I was. I was very young at the time, but he migrated this way. And then the lessons that he taught me was this. And he got this from my grandfather. And my grandfather told me this once, and I didn't understand what it meant. He said, sometimes you have to learn how to separate the spaghetti from the macaroni. Now, I don't know what that meant, Ed, okay?
Tell me about that.
Because Grandpa used to drink a lot. He had his own still, so I'm not sure,
Okay.
But the wisdom in that was the act of discernment.
Okay.
Being able to make good decisions based upon sound information. Your friends aren't necessarily always your friends if they take you off your goal.
Okay.
You want to be able to make sure that people see you different from the rest. So if you're in a competitive situation, what makes you different? What makes you spaghetti, not macaroni? If everybody's macaroni, you're not going to stand out. So
Okay.
how do you become spaghetti? You want to be the spaghetti. And then my
Right.
father added to that, and my mother also helped. She said, well, you don't want to just be any spaghetti. You want to be angel hair pasta. You want to be, angel hair pasta with shrimp. Those colloquial lessons helped me to really distinguish myself in an environment. Not that I was better than anybody else, but I was able to accentuate my talents and skills in such a way that people could see that without being arrogant or conceited. So I could elevate myself in a way and let people know that I had these skills and I had these skills to offer. So
Excellent. Excellent. That is great to see how that happens. So now we've got that relay race going. We got the starter, we got the middle guy. Now we've got the anchor man sitting right in front of me here. So, Eric, you are an educator, entrepreneur, administrator, probably a number of other things. All those things come together. You help young people a lot. Everybody, but especially young people. What would you say is your purpose based on the things that you do and the things that you're passionate about?
Well, I think the first award I ever got was when I graduated from Chico State, and my advisor gave me this award, a little plaque. And
Okay.
the inscription on it really captures who I am and what I want to be known for. In
Okay.
essence, it said, this award is presented to Eric Gravenberg, so on and so forth, a brother dedicated to the liberation of the Black community. To me,
Okay.
that's who I am. Now, I'm want to make sure that I take care of all folks who are of like mind and heart. But I think that's my sole purpose, because in terms of my history, there's always been somebody that helped me. Whether I was in high school in the Upward Bound program, or when I went to college, the EOP program, there was always someone with the ladder encouraging me to climb. And
Okay.
so I think, on my tombstone, that's what I wanted to read. Here lies Eric Gravenberg, devoted father, loving husband, and a brother dedicated to the liberation of the Black community. So everything I've done has been around that premise.
Okay, now let's stop for a moment there. That is the culmination. What did you do at Chico State to make someone want to give you a plaque that read that way?
Good point. Good point. Because I was very shy in high school, and first 2 years of college, I think one of the more powerful decisions that I made that changed my life, I decided to leave the Bay Area where I grew up,
Okay.
in Oakland. And I just knew, being in that environment during that time, the height of the civil rights movement and also the Black Power movement, that I was going to be either suffocated by all the stuff that was going on. I really needed to break out. And so those first couple of years was an awakening for me, an epiphany. And I never will forget, Ed, being involved in programs like EOP and Upward Bound gave me a sense of purpose, gave me a sense that I could make it and people believing in me. But there was a turning point. I was selected to, or elected rather, to be the president of the Black Student Union. And at that time, that was a pretty powerful position on many campuses. And I wasn't a great orator, but I think people came to me because I was a good organizer, I was a good administrator. I was always kind of precision that way. But I never will forget, one of our field trips was to a state prison.
Okay.
And at that state prison, our job there was to just provide some support and encouragement to some of the prisoners. And I never will forget, I got up and I made a speech, and I couldn't tell you the exact moment or the exact things I said in that speech, but I felt the power of my voice like I never felt it before. It was amazing. Partly because I saw young incarcerated men who, when I left, they couldn't leave. And I felt that I was giving them voice through my voice. And it was at that point that I found my confidence in myself to speak up, and to speak up with a rhythm and time concept, not always over speaking, but to be able to articulate how I was feeling and what should be done, and that people were listening. Keep in mind, I went to Catholic school. In Catholic school, you don't speak up, you get spoken to. And so that was always kind of how I was raised. So that was kind of the epiphany. That helped me articulate kind of my position, helped formulate who I was and who I was becoming.
Okay. Well, that is excellent. So that definitely answers that question, that became your calling.
It did.
To help people do those kinds of things. So some of the things that you've done, educator, entrepreneur, administrator, which describe how each of those things impacted your life.
Okay. Well, I think the first thing, I was working in student activities when I was working on my master's at Chico, and that's a great job to have full time, planning parties for the university, basically.
Okay, that's good.
I've always felt that was insufficient, that was easy. That was a time where they didn't have a lot of people of color in administrative positions in higher education. And I felt that I needed to do something more meaningful. And so I applied and got a position at Humboldt State, working with one of the TRIO programs, and was involved in student retention. And from there, I just kept, looking at ways. I said to myself, well, eventually I'd like to become, either a vice president for student affairs or a president. So that seed was kind of planted by me observing other folks in those roles, having that opportunity, and saying to myself, I want to learn how to do that. And I want to learn and seek out mentors who want to help me in that regard. So I've had a lot of great mentors. So I've worked in the CSU, the UC system, as you know, both at the system-wide and campus levels. And so it required a great amount of sacrifice, because in order to move up, you had to be almost nomadic. You had to move. You couldn't get positions sometimes because they either weren't there or they weren't offered to you. And so
rhythm and time. I'm hearing rhythm and time.
There you go. So I wait for the right rhythm. I would make sure I got enough experience so I didn't move too quickly. And I also utilized whatever network I had to tell me more about the position and or to help support me gain and or keep that position. So that's how I've kind of maneuvered within the higher education sphere, from UC Riverside to Howard University to even working with a consulting firm out of Denver, but was still focused on higher ed. I took some risks. There were some, things that if I could do them differently, I probably would. And it takes a great toll on family.
Right.
Fortunately, I'm still very close to my sons, and I've grown from that experience, and I think they have too. But so it's a lot of sacrifice. So for
Right.
particularly folks of color, if you want to move up, sometimes you have to be nomadic.
Okay. And then you moved up to actually be president of a university, right?
Yeah, and that was really interesting because I had temporarily left higher education in the formal sense. I was working at a private institution, actually when I left Sac State, and it was great experience. It was more at the graduate level and kind of international programs, but I decided that I wanted to get back to more of a state system. So I was fortunate. A colleague of mine hired me to be the vice president for student affairs at community college. I was there for 4.5 years.
Right.
He decided to step down. I was encouraged to apply for the presidency of Merritt College. I was a finalist.
Okay.
I, had my town hall meeting and amongst all the other finalists, and I got a standing ovation from the crowd.
Okay.
But the chancellor at that time, who was an interim chancellor, walked out before my presentation even started. Now, keep in mind, he was there for all the others. So politically, that tells you something. So
Yes.
needless to say, I didn't get the position, okay, at Merritt. A new president comes in. Well, actually, a new chancellor comes in. He hires a new president, someone that he knew. And so I was there to help bring in the new president. The chancellor pulled me aside and he said, look, I didn't, I asked the outgoing chancellor why come he didn't hire you. And he said the outgoing chancellor told him that I was not reliable. I didn't follow through. That was a shock. Okay.
Yeah.
But how I reacted, I think, set precedent in terms of the relationship I had with that new chancellor. Because he was looking to see how I react. And I said, well, that's most unfortunate. I guess I need to work harder at changing the perception that might be out there. Now, he did not expect that. He expected me to get upset, blow my stack.
Right.
And I think that made him look at me a little bit closer. And then when I worked with this handpicked president, and she was very supportive of the work that I was doing, supporting her. And then I'd say about 9 months in with this new president, I said to her, I said, look, I'm going to retire.
Right.
And it was almost like I punched her in the gut that she said, wait a minute, you can't do that. She said, no, you're too valuable. And I said, well, I think it's time. Well, a month before my retirement was to take effect, I got a call from a president at College of Alameda who had just gotten a position. This is all in the same district.
Okay.
And she said, how would you like to be the interim president over at College of Alameda? And I said, well, I'm about to retire. She said, well, I'll talk to the chancellor. The chancellor called me later and he said, I've talked to the faculty over at College of Alameda and you have their support and the students as well. I've already talked to the board. I'd like for you to at least, consider a 6-month assignment to help me find a new president.
Right.
And, and I talked to my wife and she said, well, you should take that opportunity. It's always been part of your dream. Again, rhythm and time. Okay?
Right.
Well, 6 months turned it into 1.5 years. Okay. And they finally found a permanent president. But after 6 months, I was not really the interim anymore. I was really the president because we had to do a number of things. And then that chancellor decided to retire. And he said, I'm going to be leaving in 6 months. So we found a new president for the College of Alameda. So why don't you come over and be my deputy chancellor in the last 6 months of my administration?
Okay.
6 months turned out to be 1 year because when he left, then the board asked me to stay on to bring in the new chancellor. So I have positioned myself to take advantage of the politics, to understand who the players are, to do good work, rhythm and time, separate the spaghetti from the macaroni. But I think really what has done it is that I do everything with passion, and
Right.
and that's contagious. And Ed, you and I know
Mhm.
when you were at Sac State and the times that we've worked together on other projects. If it's not about passion, people will
Mhm.
see that you're not very authentic. And I think
Right.
people saw that in me,
Mhm.
and I've been very fortunate because of that.
Right. So that is great. And I think about that whole situation that you left Sac State just before I got there, and
Hmm.
we never had the opportunity to work together
I know.
there,
Yeah.
but obviously able to work together in the community. So I got part of it, but not all of it. But it would have been great to be a co-associate vice president with you. That would have been a dream team.
Oh man, it would have. Okay. And I had to leave Sac State because the politics there got a little crazy. And sometimes you have
Mhm.
to figure out how do you negotiate that landscape. You point out
Mhm.
a number of these things in your book, Ed, in terms of reading the politics, understanding the politics, and doing things the right politically way. And for
Mhm.
me, it was more advantageous to move up because the vice president at that time she wasn't going anywhere, and I wasn't trying to push her
Right.
out. And then I
Mhm.
needed to be, on my own. And it also gave me other opportunities that were a springboard to other kinds of things. So sometimes
Mhm.
we overstay our welcome. Sometimes we stay just long enough to do what we need to do and have to do. And it's
Right.
really kind of situational. And if you're going to
Right.
stay at a place for a long time, as you said, have a plan,
Mhm.
work that plan wisely, and build your
Right.
allies, build your network.
Mm.
'Cause that's the key to all of it.
Absolutely. Now, shifting gears, because you're also an entrepreneur. So that's a great combination for people in work. You think you work in a bureaucratic situation, then you become an entrepreneur doing both at the same time. Talk to me a little about your entrepreneurial spirit.
Okay. Well, I think the entrepreneurial side gives me the balance in terms of the day-to-day 9 to 5.
Hmm.
And even though I am quote unquote retired, my wife will tell you that I'm not really retired.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
as you know, about 9 years ago, I, with some other colleagues, formed the Hawk Institute. And Hawk stands for Higher Attainment, Wisdom, and Knowledge. It is a college and career preparatory academy for African American young men and women and other people of color who are underserved. But the primary focus is on African American. And so that has allowed me to be my most creative self in designing
Hmm.
programs, in being able to teach, being able to work with a volunteer corps, and meld all those personalities together around a common theme, which is, liberating our kids. And so my
Hmm.
grandfather taught me a long time ago. He said, when you take care of people's kids, they'll be with you 100%. And so
Absolutely.
whether it was Saturday Academy at Sac State or Hawk, it was still the same kind of principle of how do we take care of our kids and create the next generation of leaders? Because you and I will
Right.
be forever, but how do we replicate us? How do we replicate
Right.
the best of us?
And one of the things that we don't want to leave out, one of the things that happened with your entrepreneurial spirit was the Sacramento Black Chamber of Commerce. Because
Yes.
if I'm not mistaken, you were very instrumental in getting that started.
Well, I was clearly one of the folks early on the board, and we started a Young Entrepreneur Academy, or YEA. And I was asked by the board president at the time to pull something together to create young entrepreneurs. And so that program is still going on under the current, president CEO. And I've now created another kind of aspect of that program as well to keep that going. I'm also involved in another venture with some other partners to develop a digital platform for teaching financial literacy.
Hmm.
So it just goes on, Ed. And the timing on this is to make sure that I have good balance in terms of my fun stuff, the entrepreneur stuff, but also in time for family life. And without that balance,
Right.
you can't succeed. That's the yin and yang. That's the rhythm and time.
And that's how we actually got together because we were working on that entrepreneur project.
That's
And
right.
remember, one of the things we came up with was Fit for Life, was
That's
one of
right.
the outcomes that we came up with, but that's how we all got connected with that.
Indeed.
Before we go, you doing so many things. What is next for you?
Well, what's next is to finish the book about my grandfather. Okay.
Okay.
And, all the stories, all those lessons learned, the phrases, the sayings, and how they translate across 3 different kinds of lenses. One of them is,
Okay.
how do these lessons apply to life? How do they apply to love? How do they apply to leadership? So there'll be kind of like a real quick tool book of how you can use that saying for example, separate the spaghetti from the macaroni if you're in a work situation. How do you use
Right.
that in a personal life situation? And there's many more that I have, and it'll give some backstory to my grandfather and how he got to where he was. And then there'll be kind of some other toolkits for folks to use and practice.
Okay. Well, do you have is this a memoir or is there the title to the book?
Well, there's 2 titles, and the publisher is, he didn't like the first one. Okay. And the first one
Okay.
was, if it's good to you, let it kill you. Okay. Partly because
All right.
that's the pretext for do everything with passion. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
now we're negotiating. It's going to be Grandpa's life lessons for life,
Mm-hmm.
leadership, and love. So that's probably the
Right.
one that's going to win out, or some version of that. Probably won't be out
Okay.
until next year because I've still got to do some deep dive on and updating it because I've been working on it for quite a while.
Okay. Well, excellent. Excellent. Eric, this has been very enlightening. I've known you for years and I've learned new things about you today.
Well, thank you, my brother. And I want to thank you for this opportunity. And I also want to thank you for, your involvement with Hawk and all the other stuff, YEA. You've been a valuable asset, a dear friend, you and your wife. So, me and my wife, Kim, we just think the world of you guys, and just the work you're doing and helping people negotiate the landscape of education, of workplace. So important, Ed. So important. Keep it up, bro.
Well, thank you so much because that's a whole story, and I'm going to actually write my second book to get more into that whole process. But the things you've talked about are good lessons that our listeners can take from work situations where things are not so good.
Yeah.
You take an approach that's different than confrontational, and in the end of the day, ends up to be that, I guess, that secret sauce for having that Midas touch.
Yeah.
Because you take approach that is different. I think Marcus Aurelius said, the obstacle is the way.
Yeah.
And so rather than go around the obstacle trying to fight it, you look toward the obstacle and turn it into a way to be successful. And that is a great lesson. Our listeners will really, really benefit from those nuggets that you've left today.
Well, thank you, Ed. I've just learned how to be a phantom captain. Okay.
Okay.
So you don't always have to be out front. You don't always have to lead the charge, but you can work behind the scenes to get exactly what you want.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Eric.
Good.
We're going to close down for now, but I just want to thank you so much for the wisdom that you shared.
Thank you, Ed. Look forward to another time where we can have more conversation.
Absolutely. Maybe we'll have a part 2.
All right. Sounds good to me.
All right. And folks, this is WRM Work Relationships Matter. Edward Jones, your host, a certified life coach who is founder and CEO of Pro Destiny Coaching. To learn more about my program, www.prodestinycoaching.com. Eric, is there anything you want to leave our listeners as to how they can contact you?
Yes, they can contact me at egravenberg@yahoo.com. And Gravenberg is Gravenberg. You can reach me there, and that'll connect you with Hawk and some of the other programs that I'm working on in my consulting firm as well.
Absolutely. But thank you so much. Until next time, everyone, and thank you especially, Eric, but everyone have a great day.
Be well.
All right. So that is signing off. Okay, great. So we're good.
Okay, bro.